guys, can you hear me well? Yeah. So my name is Pablo. I'm a co-founder of the Angle protocol. We are a decentralized stablecoin protocol. We are issuing AG Euro, which has become one of the biggest Euro stablecoin in the market. At the moment, total value locked in the Angle protocol is around 100 million. So we've become one of the largest European defined protocol. We're still small with respect to other American protocols, but we have, let's say, a respectable size in the market. So today I'll be telling you about stablecoins. Like stablecoins are cryptocurrencies designed to keep a fixed value. They are useful in the sense that they protect their holders against the volatility of the market. So if you own a euro stablecoin, you own a crypto asset which value is designed, which is designed to hold a value close to €1. One issue is that recently there's been a lot of inflation on the euro, a lot of inflation on the dollar. And so by just holding these stablecoins, you are in some way losing purchasing power, same as holding euros. The purpose of DeFi, it's to reinvent new financial primitives. And with Angle, when we started working on AG Euro, we're like, okay, cool, we are going to bring like fiat euro, try to bring it on chain so that people will be able to spend euros on chain. But with the recent inflation problems, we thought, what can we do better? Like, can we do stablecoins that are designed to help people keep their purchasing power by simply holding the token? So like, let's say there is a 8% inflation in Europe. By holding an inflation-resistant stablecoin, like if the stablecoin is worth €1 at the start of the year, then this stablecoin should be built in a way that its value at the end of the year is 1.08 euro, meaning you can always buy the same things, but just by owning these stablecoins. This sounds super cool. Like for me, it would be a killer feature of DeFi. The problem is that building such asset is super hard. Making an inflation-resistant stablecoin, everyone in DeFi at the moment wants to try build such asset, but it's almost impossible to build. So I'm going to tell you exactly why and try to explore some designs for inflation-resistant stablecoins. So the first design you could have for an inflation-resistant stablecoin is the centralized design. By centralized, I mean a stablecoin that would work the same as USDC or USDT from Tether, where you have dollars at the bank backing the stablecoin. USDC, you give them $1, they give you one USDC, you give them one USDC, and you can always get $1. The thing is, if you want to make such a centralized inflation-resistant stablecoin, you need at the bank not to keep dollars, but you need to keep dollars which are gaining in value, appreciating at the rhythm of inflation. For that, the type of assets you would need to hold, we call it Treasury Inflation Protected Securities, or TIPS. So you could imagine a company owning TIPS, like bonds from the US government, for instance, or from the German government, at the bank, and whenever you give them a tips, they give you the stablecoin, and whenever you get the stablecoin, you get the tips or fiat, which has increased in value with respect to what inflation is worth. The thing is that this doesn't scale well at all, because treasury inflation protected securities are not fully liquid assets. You have a lot of transaction fees when you are trying to get them or sell them in the market. These are, you will need to constantly readjust the assets you have in your portfolio as inflation evolves, because the interest rates from the bonds you would be getting are also evolving. So there would be a lot of friction for making a design work like that. So the centralized approach, it could work, but there are a lot of hurdles. Not only the technical hurdles I mentioned, but also regulatory hurdles, like owning securities and issuing an asset which gains in value with respect to the dollar. I mean, I'm from the DeFi world. I wouldn't be able to talk with the regulators. Like, I wouldn't do it myself. It's another job. So now, like, there is the centralized design, but what if we have functional decentralized stablecoins which exist out there, and could we replicate the way they work to make inflation-resistant stablecoins? So the most widespread decentralized stablecoins today are DAI from MakerDAO, Angle, AG0 from Angle Protocol. No, just kidding. We're not the biggest ones, but we're trying to. There is also Frax. There is also Fei. UST from Terra used to be one of the biggest USD stablecoins based on a senior rate share model which didn't resist well. But we have ways with which we can, like, all these protocols are set of smart contracts that are designed to accept crypto assets which are volatile, strip away the volatility of these crypto assets to make something which is stable. All those decentralized stablecoins, they all work the same. And in the end, they are built to let you keep like an asset which has a constant value. So how can we use them to build inflation-resistant stablecoins? To build a decentralized inflation-resistant stablecoin relying on a set of smart contracts on a protocol, you need two things. You need an oracle, like a source of data off-chain that can send you on-chain the evolution of the inflation. That's the first thing. And then you need a mechanism, you need a protocol that is able to reverberate these oracle evolutions, provide them on-chain, and also like help the stablecoin keep its peg and keep a value equal to the target value you are trying to have. So I'll first talk about the oracles. By the way, yeah, sorry, I don't have the slides, but normally you have the summary of what I'm trying to say, here. So about the oracle, there are already some decentralized protocols which are trying to build inflation-resistant stablecoins, notably Frax, which is doing it with something which is called the FPI. There is also Vault. It's a project that is incubated by the Fei protocol. And both are using the same oracle, which tracks the consumer price index, CPI, as people call it in the UI. It tracks like the cost of a basket of goods, and it's often used as a way to measure inflation. There is an issue with using the CPI as an on-chain oracle to price inflation and to get within a blockchain setting the evolution of the inflation. The first issue is that the CPI is based on data that is manipulable. It is published it depends on the central bank, but it is published on a monthly basis by the central bank, based on computations that tend to vary. Like for instance, if you go to the US, sometimes they'll include consumer goods in the CPI, sometimes they will include transportation, but there are also, in some countries, they are not using the cost of transportation to measure inflation. So it's not a fully reliable source. The other issue is that it's published once every month. And the fact that it's published once every month means that you could technically front-run the CPI evolution. Like insiders in the system could know like, oh, inflation is going to be 2%, it's not going to be 4% at the end of the month. And these people could take actions before the oracle update to gain a profit. It's pretty hard to grasp, but this opens the, like using CPI as an oracle, if you use that, you should know that you are exposed to this kind of manipulations. So what's the solution? You still need oracles. One good way and one good oracle solution could be to compare the price of inflation-linked securities with non-inflation-linked securities. And by comparing the price of this kind of securities like German inflation-linked German bonds and non-inflation-linked German bonds, you can have a sense of like how the market perceives inflation is going to be. So you can have a real-time estimation of the market's anticipation of inflation. And by using that, you could in some way build a, so I'm sorry if it's pretty technical, I'll go into non-technical things after, but you could build a time-weighted average evolution of the market's anticipation of inflation, which in the end is a non-front-runnable, non-manipulable way to track inflation. And you could use that as a way like to build your oracle to get the evolution of inflation on-chain. So this is the first technical problem. I think this solution, no one has tried it out. I guess we will soon at Angle, but this is a way to build robust, decentralized, non-manipulable oracles that you could use for decentralized stablecoins. Now that this question is solved, which mechanism do we use to make inflation-resistant stablecoins? There are different types for decentralized stablecoin protocols. For Angle with AG0, we have invented a new way to make stablecoins designed as to be capital efficient and like over collateralized. I won't go too much into the details of it, but like what are the famous designs? There is the senior rate share model. This is the one from Luna, from UST, which relied on UST, which is Luna is a secondary volatility token. It's like a proxy for the demand. It used to be a proxy for the demand in UST. So when demand for UST fell low, like Luna fell to zero. We've seen that this model doesn't work. It cannot resist bank runs. And so using a Luna-like model to build an inflation-resistant stablecoins, if it didn't work for the dollar, it wouldn't work for an asset which is even stronger than the dollar. So this, we can put it on the side. Now, there is another way you could make an decentralized inflation-resistant stablecoins, provided that you have a solid oracle. I will call it the hedge fund model. It's the model that Frax and Vault are using. It consists in saying, give us USDC, or DAI, or another USD stablecoins. I will invest this USDC and DAI, get a yield on this, and hope that the yield I get on my USDC and DAI is superior to the inflation on the dollar. And so if you give me one USDC, and if there is 8% inflation, and if the protocol manages to make a 9% yield, then they're good, because if you come back after a year from your one inflation-resistant stablecoin, they're able to give you 1.08 USDC, meaning that you've kept your purchasing power by owning the stablecoin. Problem is, what happens if you're not able to make a yield that is sufficient with your protocol to counter for the inflation? Well, we don't really know yet. These are new experiments which have just launched. Frax, when this doesn't work well, like when you, like they have planned for the case where they're not able to make a yield which is high enough with their reserves to keep something, to always keep more reserves than liabilities in their balance sheet. So liabilities here are the stable coins they have issued. They are planning to rely on a secondary token, which is the FPIS, Frax Price Index Share. And so they will give you the governance token if they, to offset for the difference in yield they wouldn't be able to make compared with the inflation. I'm not sure this will work, but let's give it a try. DeFi is about experimenting. The only thing that I care about personally is that people using these assets, owning the governance token, are aware of the risks and know that this may fall to zero if they fail to make a sufficient yield. So having stablecoin protocols which work like hedge funds, it could work to make inflation-resistant stablecoins, but it may not be completely bulletproof. The last model I'm going to explore today is the maker-like model. The model in which you put collateral, like volatile collateral assets, like ETH, and then borrow the stablecoins. This is, for me, the most robust stablecoin model. It can resist black swan events. Maker has been resisting super well to the crisis recently, to the decrease of the ETH price with their over-collateralized model. It works with the DAI. We have just launched this morning something similar with Angle and the Euro. Why not try it for an inflation-resistant stablecoin? So, to see the complexity with inflation-resistant stablecoin, I'm just going to give you like more details how it works. You put ETH, and then you borrow DAI when you're on Maker, and you need to repay your DAI at some point if you want to see to get back again the ETH you have provided to the protocol. So to borrow one DAI, for instance, you need to bring at least $1.5 of ETH. And if the value of your ETH falls too low, then you are getting liquidated, you keep your DAI, and you lose the 1.5 ETH you brought, meaning you are losing like 50% of the value you had in the first place. So you could make a system like that with an inflation-resistant stablecoin. The issue here is that if, like in Maker, you are borrowing DAI, but if you are trying to make an asset that is inflation-resistant, you are borrowing something which is stronger than the dollar, meaning that if the price of ETH stays constant, but the value inflation is important, meaning the value of your debt increases by too much, then you may get liquidated, which wouldn't have happened if you had owned, if you had borrowed DAI. So essentially, you are borrowing something which is stronger than the dollar, and you need to get utility. You need to give utility to it, to this asset. Otherwise, there would be no demand to borrow the token. So The maker design is something which is functional, but who is going to use it? Like, I don't want to borrow an asset which is stronger than the dollar when I can borrow USD stablecoins, have my debt denominated in dollar, and then swap to the inflation-resistant stablecoins to keep my purchasing power. How do we do with all this in mind? Like, it seems pretty doomed from what I've been telling you to build inflation-resistant stablecoins. I still think that the maker model where you are borrowing the stablecoins could work, provided that there is a high volume on the pools with where this inflation-resistant stablecoin is. If you make something which is inflation-resistant, which people trust, well, everyone would want to buy the asset. And just LPing, being a LP in Uniswap or on Curve for this inflation-resistant stablecoin, it could technically provide you a yield from transaction fees, and a yield that you are okay to pay, that offsets the increased risk, the increased liquidation risk from borrowing this stablecoin. This is, for me, the way you would still be exposed to impermanent loss if you are LPing the inflation-resistant stablecoin, but it sounds probably like as the only solution. I'm ready to borrow an inflation-resistant stablecoin if I can make a sufficient yield on this. I wouldn't be able to make a lending yield because no one would want to borrow against it, as I've just said, but a yield from LPing the asset, it could suffice. So, yeah, it seems super hard to build inflation-resistant stablecoins, and maybe it seems vain to pursue this goal of making assets which are greater, which perform better than inflation. And rather than trying to build this, we should look what is already available in DeFi. There are assets existing in DeFi which are already stronger than the dollar. If you look at it, on Aave, when you own a USDC, for instance, or a AG Euro, it's a yield-bearing, I mean, it's not exactly yield-bearing, it's rebasing, but it's an asset that provides you more value than simply keeping USDC. And already having yield-bearing tokens, well, that's something which is already good, and you don't have to follow the inflation per se, because it's super hard, but already having something which performs better than the dollar, then it sounds like the solution in DeFi. And maybe another solution, rather than trying to use existing stablecoin protocols we have to build inflation-resistant stablecoins, having like protocols which are using a reserve of assets that are like correlated in different, not all correlated, but exposed to different verticals, then it may be the way. And I may sound a bit degen in that way, but what Olympus has been building with their Ohm token, maybe that's the best alternative for inflation-resistant stablecoins. Like Olympus Ohm is backed by a big treasury of different assets. It used to be something which looked like a Ponzi. Now they've introduced some features which make me more confident in their design, but in the end, like having tokens like Olympus, it may be the best way to protect against inflation. Doesn't mean that we shouldn't try building these inflation-resistant stablecoins, but now when people tell you, look, this is an inflation-resistant stablecoin, you should question the mechanism, how it works, and understand that it's hard, and that few people will achieve doing that. Well, thank you for listening.
I'm curious if you were to, if you're building an inflation-resistant stablecoin, there's something kind of weird about the UX because as a user, you're seeing the value in dollar of your coin going up, and you're like, how is that stable? And, it's stable compared to inflation, but not especially like compared to the dollar. So maybe that's a little bit confusing. So I'm wondering what you think of, instead of having the price of the token go up in dollars, rebasing mechanisms like Ampleforth, for example, which I think is probably dead.
Yes, no, Ampleforth, it still exists. And Ampleforth, they are in some way inflation resistant because their oracle is not the USD value, it's USD in 2009. So owning Ampleforth is better than owning USD stablecoins. Actually, the rebasing and the increasing in value doesn't make much of a difference. It's similar. It's different in UX, but what's underlying is the same. Like if you look at Aave, AUSDC is rebasing, and compound C tokens are yield-bearing, but it's the same thing. And you can wrap rebasing tokens into yield-bearing tokens, and you can unwrap yield-bearing tokens into rebasing tokens. So in the end, it's the same thing. In terms of the dollar value increasing, you shouldn't see inflation resistant like a stablecoin like that. You should see like it's stable to my purchasing power. Like if I put $1 in it right now, and if I still have this asset in 10 years, then I should still be able to get the same purchasing power in 10 years than what I had with my dollar in 2022.
Okay, maybe one last question, and then we need to go to lunch. Or that's it. Thanks a lot.